Hello, good morning. Welcome to this week's Learn with Lorna. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service, which has 4 archive centres in the Highlands of Scotland. We have one in Inverness, one in Portree, one in Fort William and one in Wick. This series is brought to you by HighLife Highland at no cost to the viewer, and HighLife Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're really grateful for that, and thank you very much to those of you who have done so. As you'll be well aware, times can be tough sometimes for organisations such as ours, so it's very, very much appreciated, those donations. So welcome to episode 171. It's extraordinary that we're still here doing these, getting up to that number of episode. And this week we are looking at a very exciting collection held at Nucleus, the Nuclear and Caithness Archive, our archive in Wick, which has only recently been launched, the amazing Wick Society collection. And I wanted to do this episode now today to tie in with the Wick Society exhibition, which is currently being held at Nucleus, and also a blog post being released on the Nucleus website today. So thank you very much to my colleague Jamie at Nucleus and all the team in Nucleus for the work that they have done to create that exhibition, and also to write the blog post which they have then shared with me. So thank you very much to all of them, as well of course as to the Wick Society themselves, who have obviously been central to the collecting of this collection, but also really instrumental in organising, shaping it and making it accessible publicly. The Wick Society collection is extensive. There are over 100 boxes of material, very diverse in content, and I'll come back to that in a second, as well as those 100 boxes that are outsized items including maps and plans and various other items. The catalogue for this collection alone is over 200 pages long, and all that is doing is detailing what's in it, and some of those references might just be to bundles of papers. So you get an idea really of how extensive this collection is. The Wick Society collection is not only large, but also very broad. It dates from the 1470s through to the 2000s, and it covers multiple aspects of life in Wick and the surrounding areas across the centuries. Much like the West Highland Museum papers that I spoke about a couple of years ago, probably, held in Lochaber Archive Centre, this collection also has various subsections or sub-fonds relating to different subjects. There are 28 sub-fonds within this, as a collection within a collection, if you will, with sections relating to businesses, to groups, to societies, institutes, clubs, and so many other aspects of life. I'll come back to what's in the collection shortly, but I wanted to start by looking at the story of the Wick Society itself and how it came to gather and care for all these diverse archives. And if you are part of the Wick Society or have anything to share about it, please do put it in the comments on any of the 4 pages and I will pick them up. For each collection that we hold within the Highland Archive Service, we write an administrative history, so a history of the administration of those records until they came into our care, which details the creation or curation of that collection up until the point that we started to look after it. And this is the admin history for the Wick Society collection. Since 1971, the Wick Society has worked tirelessly to promote the history and heritage of Wick. Concern about the changing landscape and extensive demolition in the town led a group of like-minded people to call a meeting. The core group, Ian Sutherland, who I've done a previous episode on, Mary Cabrelli, Marjorie Mackenzie and Jessie Sinclair, resolved to establish the Wick Society. In 1974, the Society set up a small museum within the Carnegie Public Library building. This depicted the coopering trade, and the success of this exhibition gave members of the Society confidence to expand. Caithness County Council offered the lease of listed buildings in Bank Row to the Wick Society in 1980. Repairs and alterations were made to the buildings, the electrical system was upgraded and the gardens were landscaped, and the Wick Heritage Centre opened its doors in 1981. Ian Sutherland, the Wick Society's founding chairperson, said, the cooperation between the district council and the society, who were often at loggerheads over redevelopment, is unique. As we both recognise in our different ways, there is a need to preserve this town's rich history. The Heritage Centre is an outstanding and rewarding result of what real cooperation between citizens and a council can do. Moving forward in time, in 2002 the Wick Society bought the lands and buildings to the east of the Heritage Centre, enabling them to expand further. And on the 6th of January 2004, the Wick Society became a company, limited by guarantee, and the Wick Heritage Centre became the Wick Heritage Museum. They also purchased the museum that year for a nominal sum. The Wick Society is committed to preserving and promoting Wick's proud heritage for the inspiration of future generations. Today the Wick Society has under its wing a number of other historic buildings and collections, so not only the Wick Heritage Museum, but also Cowie's Yard, the Herring Mart, the Lifeboat Shed, the fantastic, amazing Johnson photographic collection, the traditional Fife fishing vessel, the Isabella Fortuna, and the wonderful Wick Voices oral history project. And I'll come back to a little bit about each of those at the end. And now, in addition to all those strands, the Wick Society also has its archive collection accessible via Nucleus. So about the collection itself, I mentioned the size of it and the breadth and those early and late covering dates. As I said, it's comprised of 28 sub-fonds or sub-collections. They're varied in both subject matter and in chronological scope, so covering a wide time period. The herring boom and the role of Wick within the fishing industry throughout the 19th and 20th centuries is prevalent, both directly and indirectly through many of these sub-fonds, as well as the Society's deep connection to community and to various local initiatives and clubs. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of how the Society came about, what they set out to do and what they continue to do, and the way it's grown and diversified. So what are those sub-fonds? I've mentioned them several times now, 28 sub-collections. What is in this collection? I mentioned in that extract there from the admin history that Wick's fishing heritage, herring shipping, fishing industry looms large in the collection. And that's particularly the case in subsections, sub-fonds 1, 2, 3 and 15. WS1, the first subsection, are the records of Donald Waters and Sons Fish Curers. And this was a business that was established in Wick, but went on to have concerns across the UK in numerous parts, so connections in Lerwick, in Fraserburgh, in Great Yarmouth and various other fishing ports. This part of the collection dates from the start of the 1800s and goes through to the 1950s, and it includes ledgers, correspondence, stock books, receipts and invoices, insurance papers, shipping documentation, and, really fascinatingly, documents relating to the herring gutters. And I've spoken, every time I speak about Wick, this comes up, that we talk about the fishing industry, of course, and about the herring girls. This part of the collection includes the 1912 Women's Barrel Book, which shares the date and the number and the names of the fishing, the herring girls, and the number of barrels that each filled. And then there are other volumes that detail the women's hours, their wages, their accommodation, and agreements of employment. But my favourite part of this particular collection, WS1, is WS1612, the Herring Gutters Correspondence. Written by the herring girls, often to confirm their working arrangements or their plans for travel and accommodation, the practicalities of running a hard industry and taking part in it. And it was interesting, Jamie, my colleague in Nucleus, and I were talking about this the other day, that for many years the herring girls, who often came from the Western Isles, from Lewis and so on, to Wick to follow the fish, and then down the coast to Lowestoft, to Gorleston-on-Sea, to Great Yarmouth, were so well travelled. I think we maybe don't really think about that the extent that these young women would travel the country. And on that note, about how hard an industry it could be, this collection really sheds light on how the business worked. There are maps showing the principal ports and seasons of the herring fishing industry, and they illustrate really what an itinerant way of life this was, with ships and associated trades like the coopers, like the gutters, moving from, as I say, the Western Isles to the north of Scotland down to the east coast of England to follow the fish. There are a series of letters between Donald Waters and his son Don from 1928 to 1930 that reveal a bit more detail about the practicalities of running this business. So this example here is from 1925, written from Gorleston-on-Sea in, I think, Norfolk. Someone can correct me if I've got that wrong, but I think just along the coast from Great Yarmouth. Gorleston-on-Sea, 7th of October 1925. Dear Father, the fishing was light yesterday, about 12 crans, and a cran is a measure specifically for measuring herring. One cran was usually around 1,200 fish. So about 12 crans was the average for the fleet. Today, 3 boats up with an average of 80 crans. It is now 4 o'clock and no more in sight. The quality for last week would run to 1/3 to 2/3, dead small, and the average price would be around 33 shillings for the week. Our Wick women and Grant got here yesterday morning at 8:45. They had a good run. They all got their trunks, but it was late in the afternoon before they were sent from Yarmouth. I received a cheque by post from Bloomfields on Friday night. It was on Bankley's Bark. It was on Bankley's Bark for £293, 13 and 11, the salt, etc. for Wick being kept off. I enclosed the different accounts. I've put it to credit in the NP Bank here, and the banker was very pleased. The weather is fine, and with a fleet of about 550 boats, we hope to do some good when we make a start. Our Stornoway girls did not get over on Thursday, but we hope they will be here in time for Tuesday. We got their trunks Friday and Saturday. I believe a special came in today with the Highland girls, but I don't know if ours came or not. We'll know tomorrow. I have nothing more to say, but we are all fine. Your loving son, Don. P.S. I will be in Yarmouth with John Meiklejohn tomorrow. I just felt when I read that, and you can have a look at it on Jamie's blog that has been uploaded today, I just thought there were so many interesting insights there about the scale of the industry. 550 boats in the fleet going out that day, and that peripatetic nature, all of those people moving from place to place. The references there to the shiploads of the Highland girls, the Stornoway girls, the Wick women, that they see as totally separate and disparate groups, which I found interesting. So the papers of Donald Waters, fish curers, make up the first sub-funds of the Wick Society collection, WS1. I mentioned that WS2, 3 and 15 also relate specifically to the fishing industry so central to Wick's story. WS2 are papers relating to Wick and Pontneytown harbours and fishing industry, dating from 1801 to 1988. And that collection includes accounts and financial records, correspondence, invoices, legal papers, feuds, charters and plans. It also includes references to the Wick Harbour pilots who guided the vessels in and out of Wick Harbour. They, from 1908, were based at the Pilot House, which became disused in 1953 and was closed. But Ian Sutherland, you'll be amazed to hear, from 1974 onwards undertook the restoration of that with other people, of course. It's interesting, if you've listened to me for all 171 episodes, there are names that come up again and again. I've talked often about Alexander Ross. Oh, who built the building? Alexander Ross. And when you're looking at the Wick Society and events in Wick over the last, 50, 60, 70 years, you often find the mark of Ian Sutherland involved. That collection, WS2, also includes the British Fisheries Society, whose development of a harbour on the south side of Wick Bay in the early 1800s changed Wick from a small port into the largest herring port in Europe. As well as that, there are papers relating to individual fish merchants, including John Bremner of Barrigal Street in Wick. So that's WS2. If I move on to WS15, there are papers here relating to the Wick Herring Queen and the Gala. Let me read you the admin history for this section. This event, the Wick Herring Queen, was first held in 1937 and was organised by a subcommittee of the Wick Riverside and Town Improvements Committee, which had been in existence since the reclamation of the tidal lands in the centre of the town early in the 20th century. The idea seems to have come from the coronation of King George VI, which had been held earlier the same year. Another factor was that the fishing in Wick had been very bad for the previous 6 years, and the fishing fleet had dwindled to a handful of boats. You can imagine what a difference that would have made to that community. The Herring Queen Committee resolved to try and bring a little pageantry and cheer to the town, and organised a festival which exceeded their most optimistic hopes. A girl, who to begin with had to have at least one parent connected with the herring industry, was elected queen. On the day of her crowning, which took place at the Braehead, she was taken to sea on a drifter, escorted by as many of the fleet as wished to join. They carried passengers, and the flotilla went as far as the mouth of Wick Bay, where they turned to present a very impressive spectacle as they steamed in convoy back into the harbour. While the exact number of spectators was not counted on the day, about 8,000 people are believed to have watched the arrival of the first Herring Queen. On landing, she was greeted by the provost and other dignitaries, escorted to the crowning platform, where the crown was placed on her head by the previous year's queen. The crown itself was made of tinned copper with the ensign armorial of Wick surrounded by symbols of the town's connection with the sea and the fishing industry. The insignia is surrounded by a rope, supported by 2 dolphins, and is leaning on crossed tridents. The frame of the crown is in the form of a net, with herring superimposed, a design drawn from the arms of the borough of Pontleytown, which lies on the south side of the river and was amalgamated with Wick in 1901. When the ceremony was over, a procession of decorated lorries and carts went through the main streets of the town to gather money for local causes. Many organisations took part in the parade. The Queen was elected for a year, and in this capacity she attended many local functions, opening sales of work, garden fetes, and other fundraising activities. There were no festivals from 1939 to 1948, but by then the herring fishing in Wick was in terminal decline. The last Herring Queen was elected in 1953, the same year as the herring fishing ceased in the traditional way. The organisers saw no point in holding a Herring Queen ceremony when no herring was being landed, and so the committee was dissolved, and responsibility passed back to the Town Improvements Committee, who changed the name to the Gala Queen, and who continue to hold this ceremony and processions in July every year. So, interesting there about the adaptation, the change, the fact that what it had been designed to represent was no longer relevant, so how could they reshape it so the town still had the excitement of it and the positivity of it. But again there, evidence of the herring industry's impact on every aspect in life, either directly or indirectly. This part of the Wick Society collection, WS15, comprises of the minutes of the Herring Queen Committee, programmes and correspondence, posters, and all sorts of information relating to the Herring Queen, but also to other Caithness festivals as well. And I thought the best way to showcase the scale of the Wick Herring Carnival Week was to share part of a 1938 article from the John O'Groat Journal, which is also held at Nucleus. So I mentioned that the first one was in 1937, so this is only the second year, and you can tell the amount of anticipation that has built up around the event. The big article entitled Wick's Herring Queen Spectacular Procession and Ceremony. So this is the following year. Wick's Herring Queen Carnival Week festivities, which open on Monday, is the most ambitious programme of its kind attempted in Caithness. This is the outcome of the great success which attended the first Herring Queen pageant last year. It was felt that a week of events, with the Herring Queen crowning ceremony and carnival procession as the outstanding feature, would be appreciated by visitors and townspeople alike. It goes on to describe the events of this now full week. The festivities will last from Monday, July the 18th to Monday, July the 25th. Swimming sports, arranged by the Northern and Trinky swimming clubs, will be held at the North Head Bath on Monday evening. On Tuesday evening, there will be an inter-town ladies football match between Wick and Thurso in Harmsworth Park, and on Wednesday there will be a Keep Fit display, the first in the north, in Rosebank grounds. Chief interest, of course, will centre on Saturday's proceedings, the carnival procession and the crowning of the Queen, Miss Alice Taylor, elected by her fellow pupils at the high school. On Sunday there will be an open-air religious service on the Brayhead conducted by the Salvation Army, and on Monday evening the prizes will be presented in the Breadalbane Hall, followed by public dances in it and in the Rifle Hall. From the point of view of pageantry, last year's show was deservedly described as the best ever seen in the North. With this reputation, the promoters have no easy task in maintaining the standard, but a genuine attempt has been made to add to the pageantry and the colour of the celebrations. On this occasion, 2 queens with their full retinues will be on view, with the Queen-elect and the 1937 Queen. Both will take part in the procession in specially designed carriages. The Queen-elect and her court will be attired completely in newly designed costumes. It's quite amazing, isn't it? The Queen and chief attendants will arrive at the harbour in the Drifter Sweet Pea, escorted by seine-net boats. After the landing ceremony in the harbour, a special attraction in itself, they will drive in an open carriage to join the procession in Argyle Square. This year's procession is to be led by the Herring Queen flag on a horse lorry, on which there will be a fishing boat with Wick's 2 oldest active fishermen. It goes on to describe other events that will support the week: an acrobatic display prior to the landing of the Queen at the harbour, the singing of the Herring Queen shanty written specially for the occasion. This will be sung by a choir during the crowning ceremony. The Salvation Army and the Wick and Thurso pipe bands will be in attendance, and signalling the arrival of the Queen on her approach to the platform, 500 pigeons will be released. There will be a bonfire in the bay at the close of the proceedings. And it goes on to finish: the organisation of this elaborate programme has been voluntarily carried out by the committee for the purposes of helping the town. First, by attracting visitors, and second, by assisting charities. And this year, the funds are in aid of Wick Playing Fields Association, Wick Nursing Association, and the Shipwrecked Mariners Society. So, there you go, you get an idea of the scale, and those of you who are in Wick can let me know, because I have never been to the gala, Wick Gala Week. Let me know if it's still as dramatic. Do you still release 500 pigeons? But the Wick Society collection doesn't only deal with the fishing industry, although, as I said, it does permeate into many areas of life. But the collection also includes papers relating to clubs, societies and groups. So let me list some of them, and then we'll dive a bit deeper into a few of those. There are documents relating to Wick and Pontleytown Mercantile Debating Society, Wick and Pontleytown Industrial Cooperative Society, Caithness Music Festivals, Wick Boy Scouts, Wick Swimming Clubs, and Common Gaelic, the Wick branch of the Highland Society, Wotton Young Men's Mutual Improvement Society. So everything that the Wick Society have collected, it relates to children, to young people, to workers, to social activities, all aspects of life over hundreds of years. We'll start by looking at some of the hobby-based ones that I mentioned there, as opposed to those that relate to work or self-improvement. I was amazed when I looked at WS16, the records of Caithness music festivals, to see the breadth of material that was included in the 4 boxes that make up this section of the Wick Society collection. There are constitutions, minutes, financial records, correspondence, syllabi, programmes, all sorts of things connected to Caithness County Music Committee, Caithness County Orchestra, Wick Musical Association, established in 1904, the Carnegie Committee for Music and Drama, the Wick Philharmonic Society, a huge amount of material relating to music in the county and in Wick particularly. So you can use this to find out what was on the Wick Musical Association's Grand Ballad and Choral Concert in 1922, or you could read the minutes of the Caithness County Orchestra for 1950, or read notes on the performances at the 1956 Caithness Music Festival. I thought that was interesting. Having performed in a school music festival, the thought of someone having kept all their comments on my performance is slightly unnerving, so it'd be interesting to see what's in there. But if music's not your thing, maybe you'll find something of interest within WS18, Wick Swimming Clubs. Wick has 2 outdoor swimming pools, the Trinky and the North Baths, which I went down a rabbit hole yesterday when I was putting this together, looking at both organisations' Facebook pages and beautiful photographs, and obviously a huge amount of work going into caring for them. The North Baths is situated just outside Wick Harbour on the north side, which used to be an old harbour. And the Trinky, which is a sea pool, is situated, it was part of an old quarry, and it's situated just past the old Coast Guard station on Wick's south head. Trinky, incidentally, is the Scottish word for trench. As I said, both of these pools are now maintained by active and passionate groups, the Friends of the North Baths and the Trinky Heritage Preservation Group. And Section 18 of this collection, WS 18, relates to both of these pools and events taking place within them. And it contains minutes, membership records, financial records, detailing the management, but also, as I say, competitions and events that happened. Lots and lots of memories, I think, associated with this part of the collection and with swimming in the Trinky and the North Baths. In fact, as I said, I went down such a rabbit hole that I immediately came away from it and was like, right, I need to go. I need to go to Wick and go and visit these two baths. The Trinky was opened in the early 20th century and the North Baths in 1904. And one of the bodies involved in the creation of the North Baths was the Riverside and Town Improvements Committee, who I mentioned before. And the papers of this body make up WS 14, the 14th section of the Wick Society collection. The Wick and Pontleytown River Improvement Scheme was a plan for improvements on the river and on its banks, conceived by Wick Town Council in partnership with a committee of local gentlemen in 1892. And they had various aims. Obviously, the title suggests they had the aim of improving Wick and Pontleytown amenities, but also they had the dual aim of giving employment to those who were out of work, therefore trying to address some of the destitution among the local population that had come about by the collapse of the fishing the previous year. WS 14 is full of information which sheds light on events and things happening in Wick, developments in Wick. Members of the Wick Town Council generally usually served on the improvement committee as well. There are job specifications and quotes for work, employee records, draft minutes and plans showing proposed changes to weirs and bridges and so on, as well as correspondence recording deliveries and supplies, as well as ideas for projects and events going forward. So for instance, there are references to the potential to buy boats for boating on Wick River and the suggestion of leasing ground for circus performances. And that's not the only sort of official body or organisation that's represented. The Wick Society collection also includes local authority records, including Wick Borough and Caithness County records, and a large number of documents, over 30 boxes, relating to Lathron Poorhouse. And I'm not going to go into that at all, even though it's a big chunk of the collection, because I have a Caithness Poor Relief Learn with Lorna coming up soon, so I'm not even going to go into that at all. Institutions are also represented through WS 5, Noss Head Lighthouse Records, and WS 13, the Carnegie Public Library, where Caithness Archives was located prior to the opening of Nucleus in 2017. And then finally, the Wick Society collection includes sub-funds relating to individuals and estates. So for instance, WS 8, the Pontleytown Estate Papers, WS 22, Papers of James Sutherland, Brough, East Clyth, WS 23, papers pertaining to Alexander Bain, inventor, who I'm hoping to come back to. WS 24, papers pertaining to Ian Mackay, journalist. But I wanted to finish off with a look at WS 21, Wotton Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association. This sub-funds dates from around 1863 and it includes rules, bylaws, minutes and various other information through to the association's dissolution in 1962. It's not the same, incidentally, for anyone who's familiar with the concept of a mutual improvement society. It is not the same as the mutual improvement society you might associate with the Latter-day Saints, which has the same name. The Wotton Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association was founded in around 1863. And in the rules created at the time of its formation, Sir Robert Anstruther, who was the honorary president, wrote this: In the absence of libraries, reading rooms, or any such means of mental culture within the reach of the young men resident in Wotton, there was felt a necessity for a considerable time for the institution of some association, having in its object mental improvement, the acquisition of confidence and facility in expressing one's ideas, and a cultivation of friendly intercourse amongst those young men of the parish who are desirous to unite mutual self-help. So, typically wordy of the period, but basically as there are no libraries or reading rooms, we need a place. We've thought for a long time we need a place where we can come together, we can debate, we can discuss, we can learn from each other. I found it really amazing that in a parish of 49 square miles with no major settlements in it, that there was an appetite for such a society, and an appetite that went on for 100 years. WS21, as I mentioned, includes the rules and the bylaws, the minute books, the financial records, some membership information, and documents relating to events, activities about the association, but also a number of poems, editorials for the association's magazine, and speeches and various other documentation. And amongst those contributions to the association's magazine is this 1957 article by George Henderson. One winter evening about 20 years ago, some long-forgotten business took me to the village near which I had just made my home. So he's writing it in 1957, but talking about 1937. When I was ready to return, a sudden drenching downpour sent me hurrying to seek shelter at the post office. Here I was joined by others who quickly decided to make a dash for the reading room and invited me to accompany them to a meeting of the young men. More for shelter than amusement, I accepted their invitation, feeling that I could go unnoticed amongst the other young men. It was still early, and the room was quite empty, and deliberately I chose this corner seat at the back, where I would have a good view and yet remain unseen. Soon the young men began to arrive, and with them some who were not so young. They gathered about the fire and stood talking until one entered carrying a book and some papers under his arm. Obviously he was the one in authority, for at his coming the others took their seat, whilst he, placing his book on the table, looked over them as a schoolmaster would look over his class. Perhaps he was a schoolmaster, I thought, or even maybe the blacksmith is the secretary, said my neighbour, and shattered my reverie. A policeman entered next and sat solemnly near the door. The secretary now deemed it safe to begin, for at his signal a youth rose to take the chair. In a neat speech he declared the meeting constituted and called for the minutes of the previous meeting. I did not hear what was read nor the discussion that followed, for I was studying those present. I could recognise some faces and was trying to recall where I had seen them, and I remembered visits to sheepdog trials, ploughing matches, football matches, concerts and public houses. There was another interruption, as a newcomer entered and without embarrassment took a seat near the policeman. An overworked farmer, perhaps, whose late arrival was taken for granted. He was indeed. I had to cut short my survey to listen to the leaders in debate. These were complicated by the chairman, who then announced that discussion about this debate would now follow. There was a long pause, while those present assessed various attitudes of deep concentration. Some looked up, some looked down, others looked sideways. I looked at the chairman, and he, mistakenly thinking that looking at him meant I was ready to give my opinions, called on me to speak. I rose, trembling at the knees, to make a maiden speech. In my anxiety to avoid any remarks that might give offence, I said little or nothing that was appropriate. It was indeed a feeble effort, as the next speaker pointed out, while he proceeded to give me my first lesson in debating. I had not noticed him earlier, for he was of very small stature, but a ready wit and an abundance of good humour more than compensated for his loss of inches. At times he had the power to make tall men feel very small. I was now feeling very small indeed, but others came to my aid, and I was able to return the debate with a better notion of what was expected of me. I can't repeat the remarks that were made, nor tell who made them, but it's sufficient to say that when the end came, the honours were fairly even, and the debate was very much enjoyed. I went out into the night, and I walked in delight, and now, after 20 years, I have only to be quiet and to remember, and I can recapture that delight which I experienced so often in the subsequent meetings of the young men. May a gleam of that delight reach you tonight from these pages. It's a lovely article, I think. It reminded me of John Buchan, the 39 Steps, where he gets called to stand up and make a speech about free trade when he's not prepared for it. The association was to dissolve just 5 years after George wrote those memories, coming to a close in 1962, by which time it was called the Wotton Mutual Improvements Association. When the association dissolved, the £26.04 that it had in the bank were distributed between the Wotton Brownies, the Wotton Guides, the Wotton Lifebuoy team and the Wotton Boys Brigade. It was less than 10 years later that the Wick Society would come into being with the aim of protecting and promoting and sharing the heritage and history of Wick. And they continue to do this through Wick Heritage Centre, Wick Heritage Museum, through the fantastic Johnson photographic collection, around 50,000 photographs of Caithness from 1863 to 1975. Through Wick Voices, which is an ongoing oral history project recording the memories of the people in the area. The Isabella Fortuna, which is a traditional fishing vessel restored and maintained by a team of dedicated volunteers, and through the various other projects that the Wick Society undertakes. And now, of course, the archive collection is catalogued and available to look at Nucleus, and the team at Nucleus work very closely and really value their relationship with the Wick Society. If you don't have any particular thing to look at, so you can come along to Nucleus, have a look at any of these items, but if you don't have anything particular that you want to research but you're just generally interested in this amazing collection, please do go along to Nucleus and have a look at the Wick Society exhibition, which is on until the end of this month. And please do make contact with Wick Society as well, and maybe attend one of their upcoming talks advertised on the Nucleus Facebook page. And please do have a read of Jamie's blog on the Nucleus website. But I hope you've enjoyed finding out a little bit about this wonderful society, the amazing records that it has cared for and which we now care for on their behalf. So thank you for joining me. I hope you can join me next week, where I will be looking at Ross and Cromarty police records. But in the meantime, a reminder that this series is brought to you from High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then please do so. It really is. I can't tell you how appreciated it is. Thank you.